Good morning, and welcome to the Morning Breath live stream, where we start our day with coherence. I'm your host, Jeremy Tennell, systems designer and coherence coach. And this is Freeform Friday. This is where we take the themes of the week and we break them down into questions that I answer in a way in order to personally engage a little bit more. I think some of the content, all one of the things about sitting down and writing out these scripts is that uh, my intention and my hope is to convey a little bit of life lessons and wisdom that I may have learned along the way. But I think sometimes it sounds like I'm talking at you. And the idea behind Freeform Friday is that it's an opportunity in order to gauge interpersonally. This is my experience and where how these things have shaped me. So before we actually get started, um, let's engage in a little bit of feedback. If you are here for the first time, totally appreciate it. If you've been here a few times, awesome. I'm so excited to be here and have you all here with me. Like and follow the live stream. That feedback is so important. It really allows me to know and understand who's engaging and if something strikes you today, if something brings up an idea or an emotion, leave a comment. Let's engage in conversation and dialogue together. Let's not just consume content. Let's utilize these platforms as a means of creating community. So what I do with Freeform Friday is I take the themes and the scripts that I write for the week, and I upload them to chat. And I ask chat to create 2 questions per theme. So I've read through these questions once this morning as I was putting the script together, but um, I didn't form any answers. So Freeform Friday is exactly as it sounds. Freeform Friday. So let's dive in. Let's find our first question. So the first question is about Tuesday's theme. I was traveling on Monday, so we didn't meet. On Tuesday, we talked about this idea that I actually saw online. I saw on YouTube, and it's called Neichuan. It's a Chinese term that refers to the idea of when life becomes a competition that nobody wins. And it's this idea that's being expressed. You know, what I found interesting about it was that the commentator was explaining how this concept, Neichuan, is being expressed in Chinese culture, in industrial culture, where workers are beginning to express this, but also amongst college students. And I thought that was really interesting because I think that's something that our culture is also expressing, that the pace is ramping up, that the intensity is ramping up, that we're all participating in it. And yet, why? Where's the payoff here? And I think there's an inevitability to it. And interestingly enough, the themes move in the direction where we kind of touch on that. So the first question is, where in my own life have I caught myself participating in the cycle of Neichuan, working harder, doing more, and pushing faster, only to realize I was no longer moving towards what actually mattered? I think the first time that this hit me, I was young. I I graduated from university with my bachelor's degree in 1998, and it was right in the time in which mobile devices, cell phones, were really hitting the market, the popular market. They existed for quite a long time in analog form. It was analog signal. Literally a wave carrier um, that wasn't digitized. And somewhere around 1995, 6, many of these carriers began to experiment with the new digital carrier license that were being issued, and a company like VoiceStream was invented here in the Pacific Northwest, which eventually became one of the largest. At one point, was the largest, may still be, digital mobile provider in the world. That company, VoiceStream, which was Western Wireless before, I went to go to work for them, and I found an opportunity at 26 years old in order to put my degree to work, and I was very successful at it. I I was good at corporate culture, and the organization was growing so fast that that there was opportunity, and I took advantage of that opportunity, and I ran really hard for a number of, for a few years. And one of the things that happened is as VoiceStream was acquiring all these companies, all these other providers who had, to become the largest one in the United States at the time, was the ability to create a department called corporate customer care, because none of the large corporate providers were being taken care of at the time. So I helped create that department, and I built it from scratch inside this corporation at 28 years old and 29 years old, and that was an amazing experience. And the thing I didn't have any experience with, and the way the circumstances kind of rolled out with that whole situation, was I had no experience with corporate politics at all. And I blundered into a number of situations in which I didn't know what I was doing. And I was working at a director level, but I was a manager, and that was because I didn't have a director. I didn't have a VP. Like the VP who sponsored it left, and nobody knew what to do with my department for over a year, and so I just took it on, and I walked into more than one situation in which people were wondering what I was doing there, and for legitimate reasons. And because of that political turmoil, and because I allowed myself to be exposed, uh, and leveraged, because I didn't know what I was doing, I got scooted into a situation in which I was walked out the door, and somebody who had the leverage and wanted that department took it, and that was devastating to me. Devastating. It destroyed my ability to be in corporate culture. Um, I could never go back. I tried. I just wasn't able to do it. And I realized in that moment that I had pushed and pushed and pushed, and that the game wasn't fair. That it wasn't going to play fair. People weren't going to play fair, because that's the way the game was designed. And then I suddenly found myself in a position in which I had to ask, am I willing to play unfair in order to get ahead? And the answer was pretty clear to me. I'm not. I'm not. So I stopped. When I was probably about 35 years old, I just stopped. I stopped working in corporations. I stopped working in large corporations because I was unwilling to engage in the kind of human interaction that allowed me to get ahead. And so, yeah, uh, that was the first time in which I realized that what actually mattered and what I was doing there did not meet. Question number 2. How can individuals and communities distinguish between healthy, stri- uh, let me try that again. How can individuals and communities distinguish between healthy striving and destructive competition? And what practices help us remain connected to purpose rather than comparison? I thought this was a really good question. Um, my observation of those environments is so at the lowest form within those environments is rumors. Um, if you're engaging and talking about other people in your workplace, in your community, period, but let's stick to the workplace. If you're engaging and talking about other people and tearing them down, and you make people and events more important than ideas, then that's a destructive behavior at its base form. That's contributing to a destructive community at its base form, right? Like that's just the foundational piece. From there, you build onto it, right? So having relationships in which you're engaging in social behavior, you're engaging in pseudo friendships, you're building a pseudo community within your team. But when you walk away and you go home to work, it's a whole different life. And you're walking away from this thing, and work life balance becomes this thing that you have to create for yourself. You have to peel yourself away from this toxic environment that is the workplace. And this isn't all workplaces. There are definitely workplaces that are not this. But my experience with most corporate environments and many other workplaces, small to medium businesses, is that we engage in these toxic behaviors of coming together because we're pushing ourselves and each other in order to produce, perform, and we're ignoring the basic human elements of this is what I've got going on in my life. This is what's happening with me. And then on the other end of that, right? Like, and the reason why we do that in those environments is because there are other people who take advantage of that. There are people who excuse me. There are people there are people who you know who want to steal all the attention, who want to who want to constantly lean into their their pain and their complaining, and they want to steal all that attention. And so we're always pushing that off with each other. We're not authentic with each other because there are people who won't be authentic, and they're like a vacuum in the space. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to maintain this idea of productivity within these environments. And to do it, we're engaging in these unhealthy, inhuman behaviors. That's a problem. That's a problem. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for community. That doesn't work for workplaces, and it doesn't work for society. And I think that in our consulting practice, one of the things that I've talked about a lot in our consulting practice is how vitally important it is for the individuals within the organizations in order to engage in practices that are growing them. That's why personal transformation actually is so important to me, because What I've observed as a consultant in these workplaces is that the leverage point is personal growth. If you want these organizations, if you want your workplace to transform, if you want your community to transform, then it's transformation on a personal level that transforms it. As the individuals grow through self-reflection, self-awareness, self-regulation, and ongoing self-inquiry, the organization also grows. You can't change the culture and the environment without changing the individual. All right, next theme. Wednesday's theme was comply or evolve, and it was about human consciousness in the age of AI. This is something I do a considerable amount of research on for my dissertation, and I think that I think you know we're living in one of those, which is a massive leverage point. History is swinging around this point in history. So, question number one is if artificial intelligence is primarily an amplifier, what human values and qualities do I believe need to be strengthened now to ensure technology serves life rather than merely accelerating existing problems? This is, I think, the heart of what is upon us right now. We have all grown up in a materialist society that looks at the world through the lens of, if I can touch it, feel it, smell it, taste it, then it must be real. And if I can't, then it's woo-woo. And that's not how the universe works. That's not even how physics work. The space informs informs the matter as much as the matter informs the space. And if we're only paying attention to the material, then we're missing out on the heart of all of it. And one of the things that comes along with growing up in a world of materialism is the value systems of consumption and the value systems of use and discard. And we are eating ourselves out of a home. We're consuming ourselves out of an ecosystem that was designed for our survival, more than our survival, for our thriving. And yet we're not thriving. Most of us are not thriving. Most of us are surviving. So first and foremost, I think we need a paradigm shift. We need to shift our paradigm to understand not what the world that the humans have created is, but what the universe is. Not the lens, the reality is determined by the lens in which we say it is, but that reality is what it is, even if we can't explain it. Even if we can't explain it. That paradigm is so vitally important. We have to shift. It's okay to be in existence with mystery. If we can't explain something, it doesn't mean it's not real. By changing the paradigm collectively, we shift our relationship with all systems around us, including the ones we construct. And when we shift that relationship, we begin to install different value systems. The primary value systems that I talk about are self-reflection, self-awareness, self-regulation, and ongoing self-inquiry, because they allow you to build new value systems off of that. So those are the key skills in the midst of an accelerating AI that I think are vitally important. Because if we continue to move into this artificial intelligence future from the perspective of materialism, consumption, and use and discard, We will become what is consumed, what is used and discarded. We just will. That's the eventuality. We're more than that. Question number 2. What concerns me most about the current trajectory of AI development? And what opportunities do I see for humanity if we approach this technological moment with greater awareness, wisdom, and collective responsibility? That's the incredible thing about this moment. We literally are at the cusp of expanding beyond whatever we've dreamed that being human is about. And we will do that. We will move beyond whatever it is that humanity could have possibly dreamed that humanity could become. The thing is that it will either be a nightmare, and it will be the most horrific thing you could possibly imagine, because we didn't change our paradigm, we didn't change our value system, we didn't grow as human beings, or it will be an incredible, thriving future because we did do those things. Artificial intelligence and the technologies that we are developing through our ability to push our understanding of how the universe works is going to open up a world of opportunity with plasma physics, with our ability to fold space, our ability to manipulate gravity, our ability to draw, that's what this is, to draw energy out of the vacuum. Someday I'll explain this. Our ability to draw energy out of the vacuum. We are there. We're there. The for-profit model keeps us stuck in the old paradigm, but we're there. And if the for-profit model continues to win, then we're the product. But if we can expand beyond that, then we become the servants of our own mastery. Theme number 3. Who manages you? Looking honestly at my own life, where have I developed strong self-governance? And where am I still relying upon external systems, people, and circumstances to manage responsibilities that ultimately belong to me? Well, at this moment right now, going and getting my PhD and following this path, I've left behind a vocational life that I didn't particularly like, but it paid. I had a paycheck, and in order to pursue ideas, because I believe ideas are vitally important. But in doing so, I've placed myself and my household, and this was the plan. This wasn't unplanned. This was the plan. But there's a burden that comes with this plan. I've placed myself and this household in a position in which my wife is the primary source of income. Sure, I've held that role for in order to allow her to do those things, but it's not tit for tat. And this has been the plan pretty much since we met, even though we didn't have the plan fully articulated yet. And so I'm in a position in which I'm working very hard in order to operationalize the ideas that I have developed in my dissertation work and in our consulting work, in our consulting business. And I'm trying to find ways in order to bring them to a world that requires that I bring in an income and I pay my bills and I maintain responsibilities. I don't think that that model is how the world has to work, but it is how the world works. And so as I try and build a world that might be different than the current model, the reality is that the current model, I live in the current model, and and so I am working very hard to try and contribute financially to this household and build something that will do that. So that's, if I'm relying upon external systems, people, or circumstances to manage responsibilities that ultimately belong to me, I'm relying on my wife. And that's a burden that she's carrying. And um, and it's painful to watch. I mean, she's carrying it with great grace, but I don't want to be a burden. And I don't think I am a burden, but there is a burden because I've lived it. I've walked it. I know what that feeling is. And it's a lot of responsibility. And I'm very grateful to be able to move in this direction. And it's a path that she cleared, she created, you know, she made possible, not just in what she's doing now, but in the fact that as I held the space financially, and she went and pursued her dissertation, she opened up an opportunity for us to have a consulting firm that allows us to do what we're doing. She did that. So my wife is the person that I rely on. Question number 2. What is the relationship between freedom and responsibility? And why do I believe healthy societies depend upon individuals who possess the capacity to govern themselves? Well, I think this was a conclusion I came to on my own, although I think it's talked about a lot, but I don't think it's framed well. We talk about it with soldiers, the idea that there's a responsibility to freedom. Freedom isn't free. Um, but that's kind of in our culture where it stops, right? The sacrifice of soldiers of war, mostly because in our 250 years of history as a nation, we've been at war for 243 of those years, you know. So we're heavily focused on that sort of responsibility. But the reality is that to be a citizen, to be a participant, to be a member of a community, you have a responsibility to that community. And if there's an element of freedom within that, and really the way communities work is that, in any society, are you truly free? Like, are you truly free? No, because you're in a collective, and in that collective you have responsibilities. And so not only is there the relationship between freedom and responsibility is it's dichotomous. Not only does the responsibility provide you the opportunity to be, to have elements of freedom within a society, culture, or community, but in order to maintain that freedom, you have to give some of it up in order to take on some responsibility. So they're in polarity with each other. They're constantly shifting and moving with each other. Different kinds of social systems have different kinds of freedom. You know, we talk about freedom. We raise a flag on July 4th. But do I think that the United States is truly the land of the free? No, that's ridiculous. The amount of debt that individual households hold in this country, that's an enslavement tool. That is enslaving each of us to a debt system. And our entire system is a debt system. You know, our dollar's not backed by anything. It's not backed by gold. It's backed by debt. And so the entire financial system is one that is designed in order to steal your freedom, in order to provide a value to this monetary system. That's what it's there for. So no, we are not the land of the free. We're the land of the indebted, is what we are. Communism is a way of taking that responsibility element and saying we are all responsible for the collective, so we're going to diminish our personal freedoms to the absolute. Socialism is somewhere in between, right? It's this idea of we're going to take responsibility for our collective freedom, and and here's the important part: socialism, communism, capitalism, democracy. These are 20th century concepts. We've done them. We've tried them all. We tried them all. And capitalism paired with some form of republic democracy seems to work best for that model, but it does not produce the maximum amount of thriving human beings. It does not produce the maximum amount of freedom within those human beings. Out of those systems, it does, but that doesn't mean that that is the best we can do. And our paradigm holds us to it. Our paradigm of materialism, our paradigm of consumption holds us to this maxim. So does it work? You bet it works. Would I want to live in a different sort of society? Not really. No. I mean, at least not out of the examples that are available. Um, you know, uh, I think we can do better. I think we can collectively do better, and I think our tools and the place in which we're living in right now in this society are an opportunity in order to actually do better. I was listening to if you haven't found her on YouTube or the internet, Plasma Intelligence, Dana Kipple. Um, One of the things she was saying this morning was that we have to learn to become ourselves, our true selves, and I think that's the case. I think that human beings are more than all of this materialism, all of the ideas that we can come up with. And I think we have to get ourselves back into some sort of an alignment that aligns us with something greater than ourselves, that aligns us with the reality that we are here on this planet, and it is our responsibility to steward this planet. And we have to take responsibility for ourselves individually. And once we're in alignment with that, the world and the universe will open up. All right. That is Freeform Friday. I would, one of the things I noticed about all three conversations this week is that they all pointed in a specific direction. They had common questions. How do we become more conscious participants in the systems shaping our lives, right? Nachuan was asking, about the competitions that we've inherited and ensuring that we question those things. AI asks us to question a future that we're creating. And self-governance asks us questions about how much responsibility are we willing to assume for that creation. So perhaps the invitation this week is simply become more aware, more intentional, more responsibility for the life that we're creating. Because transformation begins the moment we stop asking what's happening to me and begin to ask, how am I participating in what happens next? Thank you for joining me this morning. Take a breath. Remember, Fridays are the day in which you practice your breath work on your own. I'd love to hear comments about how that goes. Take 5 minutes, do your breath work. I'll see you Monday.